Hi everyone. Last week I posted my remix of Charlie XCX's Apple, and today I wanted to take you behind the scenes and show you how I put it all together. I'm gonna walk you through the process from slowing down the tempos to choosing the right instruments and sounds. Let's dive in. The first step was slowing down the tempo in order to give the track a wider soundscape. I experimented with different tempos, either by tweaking the song on the DAW or by singing it out loud here in the room. Eventually, I settled on changing the tempo from 124 BPM to 116 BPM. This gave the remix a lot more space for each beat and note, but I also had to make sure it didn't lose energy as a result. When it comes down to choosing drum samples, I've always felt like it may have been my weakest link. But it's still possible to get the right sounds for a project by experimenting. Okay, let's talk about choosing the right drum samples for the project. I started off with the lean drum kick, which, like its name, it's a bit lean. It's very punchy, doesn't have a lot of body. And in order to balance it, I added another kick drum, which is a bit weightier and has a bit more body. And together, they worked really nicely, without the need to overprocess them. Moving on to the snare drum, I had this clap track, just really simple and basic drum machine clap, which is really punchy and nice. And to balance it, I added this low-pitched snare drum, again to give it a bit more body, and together they had quite a nice tone to them, and they melded really nice with the kick drum that I've had before. For the live drum recording, I decided to omit the kick drum and focus just on the snare and hi-hats. I made this choice because, first of all, I wasn't confident enough to play the whole kit at this rhythm. And secondly, an acoustic kick would lean too much into the retro indie sound, which wasn't right for this remix. My microphone setup for the drum kit on this song was a top and bottom snare mics, stereo overheads, and 3 different room mics in order to give the kit a bit more vibe. Now for the synth bass, this is when things get really fun. I wanted that punchy short Juno bass sound, but I also wanted it to be a bit thicker. So I used my Model D synth to complement the Juno's tone. I want to talk about fitting the 2 synth bass parts together. Originally, I've used the Juno bass part. It has quite a unique character, kind of drops in pitch a little bit. It has this pow. So I wanted to imitate that with the Model D synth, but give it a bit more weight. So this is the Model D sound that I originally had, which is quite bland and quite basic. So to start with, I just opened its cutoff filter, allowing more high frequencies to come in, but I also started raising the decay of the filter to, again, imitate the Juno's behavior. And what I did was I added some contour, more of a shape to that filter. It was getting nicer in the ballpark, but I decided to add some resonance, or how they call it, filter emphasis on this synth. Maybe it was maybe a bit too much, so I dialed it down a bit in here. And a bit less decay as well. So this is the sound that I've just created now, but why don't I go ahead and show you what I had before. I had recorded that sound before. If I try to fit it together with the Juno, you can see they still don't meld as nicely together. So with the Juno, I started by adding a bit of saturation, but more importantly, I allocated different EQ bands to them. So meaning I've basically filtered most of the Model D's frequencies, and it allowed a lot more space for the Juno's upper frequencies to shine through. And I did quite the opposite with the Juno. I filtered out some of the low frequencies, allowing for the Model D's low end to shine through nicely. So together they worked really well, and it made a lot more sense in the context of the mix. Coming from a guitar background, I couldn't resist adding a live bass to the track. The synth bass was already quite melodic, so I wanted the live bass to add some pulse and energy. I played straight 8 notes, but at the higher octaves to help the bass stand out a bit more and help me with some of the voicings. Let's talk about fitting the bass guitar alongside the drums and the synth bass. The groove that I had already worked quite well, but I just wanted the bass guitar to provide a continuous pulse. So here's what we did. This is the bass guitar part which I've recorded. And I fed that part into this tube tech channel that accepts a sidechain from the synth bass group, meaning that every time a synth bass note plays, it ducks the level by, 7 to 10 dB. And that allows enough space for the synth bass to come through the mix in a nice and punchy way. Now moving on to another layer of compression that I've added in here. Here I've got my console 1 channel with the limiter being fed from a sidechain that runs from the kick drum in the pulse of the song. Really low attack and release, but it also has a sidechain filter, meaning that it only compresses above 77.8 Hertz, leaving all the bass frequencies intact. So yeah, this is how the bass guitar is pulsating to the groove of the song and leaving enough space for the synth bass to come through. For the guitar, I started with some funky riffs, but they ended up being a bit too busy and crowded the track. I scaled it back a bit and simplified the track, leaving some space for the vocals and the other instruments. I used some delay in order to let the guitar fill some gaps more subtly, creating a more balanced sound. One of the core sounds of the track is the Juno synth, which I've used both for the chords and the melodic lines. The great thing about this part is when you break it down, you can really see how much is going on. Okay, I want to show you why this Juno synth part was so important for the development of this remix. This is the original progression that I've played. And I've noticed that apart from the accents of the chords, there was a hidden melody there. And in addition to that, I've noticed there was a small counter melody there, which was then repeated an octave above. So I've highlighted each and every one of these elements later in the production process, and I'm going to show you how. Once I had the main Juno part down, I overdubbed the melodic progression using the Pro 800 analog synth, adjusting the attack and the decay and release to match the song's tempo. It fit perfectly with the tempo and the overall vibe of the track. Then, I revisited the small hook at the end of each second bar. Initially, I thought it could stand alone, but once I added a bigger melodic overdub, I needed to give the hook a bit more weight. So I kept the Juno sound but extended the release and the decay, and transposed the part up by an octave to spread it out over the frequency spectrum. To enhance the chords, I added an upright piano part. I started with a heavier low-end part, but for a track this poppy, I realized it needed to be much lighter. I focused on the piano's upper register and added mild saturation and delay to the sound in order to blend it into the mix without overwhelming it. Pianos can be demanding in a busy track, so it was the best way to make it sit comfortably. And to finish off the arrangement, I added an analog synth pad on a Pro 800. I used sidechain compression to make the pad move along with the rhythm, creating a sense of flow and giving it space to sit well in the mix. I also played around with the synth filter, opening and closing it to give room to the other elements to breathe. Finally, I extracted the original vocals using Logic's stem splitter and swapped them out on lalal.ai. This time, I chose Taylor Swift as the lucky winner for the AI vocals.
I just say up, we're both fall from the tree, 'cause I've been looking at you so long, we're always to me. I wanna go get up and into the sky, fills me.
And that is how I put together the remix of Charlie XCX's Apple. I hope you enjoyed this breakdown. If you've got any questions or if there's any specific part you want to see more of, drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and stay tuned for more music production related content. Happy creating and see you soon. Bye.